Thank you so much for your sacrifice and commitment. My name is Beautiful Ciasia, part of the North Anti-Violence Coalition. So without further ado, as we begin to enter in our program, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Johanna Fernandez. Let me tell you what she do, though. Johanna is a professor of history at the Baruch College of the City of New York, but also she is the coordinator at the of the campaign to bring Mumia Abu Jamal home. And so we want to thank you for that courageous initiative and welcome her to Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, I have to go directly into it. Okay, this is like a real panel discussion. While I get myself situated here, can I tell you that I'm inspired? I was inspired from the time that I was contacted about this, and we're gonna get it. We're gonna get it right.
Okay.
So, I've been inspired by this from the first time I heard about this. Why? Because ultimately, Michelle Alexander, as Beautiful mentioned, wrote this phenomenal book. A book that really mainstreamed the crisis of mass incarceration in American society, what she calls the new Jim Crow, which is essentially the new racism in the United States in the post-civil rights movement era. Over the last 30 years, working class people, poor people, black people, Latinos, immigrants have been taking a beating. It appears that the 1% is winning. The crisis of mass incarceration is essentially about punishing the poor and silencing dissent. That's really what it's about. And the reason why I'm so inspired is because this is one of the most creative examples I've seen around the issue of mass incarceration to really begin to take back our communities. I mean, we're talking about a street panel. When was the last time there was a street, anything in American society filled with people of color? It was probably in the 1960s. So what we're seeing here is an example in Newark of the kind of work that can be repeated in neighborhoods across the country. Not only across the country, but across the world, because I want to remind people that we are experiencing a human rights catastrophe in Gaza, which is an outdoor prison, right? So what we do here in Newark matters for what the Palestinians who have been demonized and racialized and criminalized by the Zionists, they too might take inspiration from what we're doing here. So I think that we need to take this to Harlem. We need to take this to the community. We're standing here in front of City Hall, but I don't know that there's anyone home. We need to take this into our communities. You know why? Because for the last 40 years, our schools have been privatized, have been thrown away. We've been fed a steady diet of rote learning and tests. And in this forum, we have the seeds of a different kind of education, right? A different kind of educational process that will tell us something about the root causes of social problems, right? That'll tell us and tell our young people and show our young people how to think critically for the purposes of transforming the world. So I've got this long talk here because I was told this is a real thing. We want a real panel discussion and we want you to give an overview on mass incarceration.
Do it.
So you to bear with me because I prepared notes given that I was told to cover mass incarceration, immigration, political imprisonment in 20 minutes. I want to start out with a quote from Dostoevsky. He's a Russian novelist who wrote probably one of the most important novels on crime and punishment. And this is what he had to say about prisons. The degree of civilization in society can be judged by entering its prisons. So I'm going to repeat that. This is why this is important. The degree of civilization in society can be judged by entering its prisons, unquote. What's fascinating is that we live in a society that calls itself the land of the free, but we incarcerate the most people in the world. It is the biggest contradiction in the world, and we have the audacity to go to Iraq and to go to Latin America and to go to Asia and tell them about their democracy. When in fact, we have one of the, on the down low, one of the most repressive societies in the world today. I want to give you a sense briefly of what mass incarceration means, and really, because many of us haven't been incarcerated, we don't know the violence, we don't understand the human rights catastrophe, and really the genocide that is going on in the prison behind the walls. We don't understand it. But recently, prisoners who went out on a hunger strike in Cole Township, Pennsylvania, gave us a sense of what's going on behind the prisons. Maybe I should just do this. Okay. So this is 1,300 men are on hunger strike still, I believe. And this is what is going on there. They are protesting the rationing of food because there is an economic crisis and the budgets are being slashed. So they're going to slash them on the backs of prisoners by rationing food, which is a human rights violation. If you are going to imprison me as the government, you have a duty to feed me. So they are rationing food, and the prisoners went out on strike demanding larger meal portions, permission to form cultural associations, the hiring of a full-time doctor, because what we don't know is that men and women die every day in the prison because they get absolutely no health care in the prison, or they get the worst kind of it. But listen to this. They are demanding permission to smile in photographs with their visiting family members. I mean, think about the dehumanization and the barbarism of that act, that you would prevent a prisoner from smiling when his son or his wife or his daughter come to the prison to visit him to take a picture with him or her. This is about the dehumanization of the prisoner, but it's also the dehumanization of us and our society, and this is why this issue is important. The United States has approximately 100,000 people in solitary confinement. That is tantamount to torture, according to the UN. When you are in solitary confinement with absolutely no human contact, what the government is doing is stimulating the process of insanity within you, because human beings are social animals. That's what defines our humanity. And to isolate you, absolutely, as is done in solitary confinement, is tantamount to torture, according to the UN. We also have approximately 50,000 children in detention centers across the country. These are immigrants who've been pushed to the United States because of the economic policies of the U.S. in Latin America. Policies like NAFTA that have devastated local economies and has forced farmers out of business. And they seek refuge right here in the United States because of U.S. policies. And we have 50,000 children who are experiencing another human rights catastrophe before our eyes. We live in a nation that is demonizing and essentially violating the human rights of children. What kind of democracy do we live in? But then there's the day-to-day suffering of ordinary prisoners that we can't imagine. Again, prisons are violent places. Why? Because human beings are intrinsically social animals. And what you're doing is that you're taking the individual outside of his community or her community and society, and then you're deploying tremendous violence on the part of the guards, in terms of the lack of health care, and so on and so forth. And part of what I think this movement needs is for ordinary people and people who've gone through the prison system to in fact become the mouthpieces of this movement, because only they can humanize the crisis of mass incarceration. I want to start out with the statistics, which are startling. In 1970, the United States imprisoned approximately 300,000 people. And you've heard it. Today, we have 2.4 million people spending their days behind bars. That means that the United States represents 5% of the world's population, but we house 25% of the world's prisoners. No other Western democratic society has imprisoned this proportion of its population. There is a statistic that suggests that 1 in 10 prisoners in the world, I'll repeat this, 1 in 10 prisoners in the world is an African American male. That, we don't have the capacity to wrap our minds around that. African American males represent less than a fraction, a minuscule fraction of the world's population. But 1 in 10 of the world's prisoners is an African American male? We have to say that we charge genocide, right? There's a long history in this country of black people going to the UN to charge genocide for the treatment of historically oppressed minorities, African American prime amongst them. But the thing is that those statistics that I put out don't really give us a sense of what's going on. There are 7.4 million people under criminal supervision by the state right now. 7.4 million people. That includes people on parole and probation. And when you talk to people who are on parole and probation, what they tell you is that parole is not about rehabilitation, it's about entrapment.
That's right.
The man who is assigned to you, the social worker, is looking for any little thing to essentially put you back in prison. So who is imprisoned? We have to, as Beautiful said,